The memo that set the tone for U.S. foreign policy. The year is 1948. World War II has been over for barely 3 years. Europe is devastated. Germany lies divided. The Soviet Union controls much of Eastern Europe. And across the Atlantic, the United States has emerged from the war in an extraordinary position of power. Inside the State Department, one of America's most important strategists is thinking about what comes next. His name is George F. Kennan. And in a classified policy document known as Policy Planning Study 23, Kennan puts America's position into remarkably stark terms. He observes that the United States possesses roughly 50% of the world's wealth, while accounting for only 6.3% of its population. Think about what that meant. A relatively small fraction of humanity controlled an enormous share of the world's wealth. But Kennan wasn't simply celebrating America's dominance. He was confronting the problem that came with it. How do you preserve a position like that? His answer was remarkably candid. Kennan wrote,
"Our real task in the coming period is to devise a pattern of relationships which will permit us to maintain this position of disparity."
And then came the warning.
We have to dispense with sentimentality and daydreaming.
The United States, he wrote, could not afford the luxury of altruism and world benefaction. It wasn't intended for the American public. It was the language of strategic planning, written inside the government at the beginning of a new struggle for global power. And Kennan wasn't some obscure bureaucrat whose ideas disappeared into a filing cabinet. He was one of the most influential American strategists of the early Cold War, the man whose ideas became closely associated with the strategy of containment. So when Kennan looked at the post-war world, he wasn't simply asking, how do we defeat the Soviet Union? He was confronting a much larger strategic question. How does the United States preserve the extraordinary position of power it inherited after World War II? And that question provides a very different lens through which to understand the emerging Cold War. Because Policy Planning Study 23 wasn't merely describing the world of 1948. It was describing the kind of world American strategists believed they now had to navigate, and the interests they believed they had to protect.